The boy's hand shot across the table, small, darker than the November rain streaking the window behind him, fingers closing around the billionaire's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't eat that food, sir," he said, voice low and urgent. "Something's wrong with it. I can smell it." That moment, in the private dining room of Mercado on West 6th, would split Daniel Okonkwo's life into before and after. But it began 3 hours earlier, on a street corner where wealth and poverty pressed against each other like opposing magnets. The afternoon had turned bitter, Cleveland winter asserting itself in sharp gusts that cut through even expensive wool. Daniel stood outside his office building, waiting for his car, when he noticed the boy watching him from across the street. 10 years old, maybe 11, wearing a jacket that had probably fit him 2 winters ago, sleeves stopping inches short of his wrists. His sneakers were held together with duct tape, the silver gleaming dully in the gray light. The boy wasn't begging. That was what caught Daniel's attention. He was just watching, with the focused stillness of someone documenting patterns. When their eyes met, the boy didn't look away or approach. He simply nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, then turned and disappeared into the maze of downtown streets. Daniel thought about him during the drive to Mercado. He thought about him while his assistant confirmed the dinner reservation. Private room, 7 o'clock, his business partner James Whitmore and James's wife Victoria. He thought about him because that morning, his private investigator had sent a preliminary report that made his stomach turn. Irregularities in company accounts, transactions James had authorized without board approval, money moving in directions that made no sense unless you assumed theft. 7 years of partnership. 7 years of building Okonkwo and Whitmore Capital Management into a firm managing $4 billion in assets. 7 years of friendship, dinners at each other's homes, vacations in Martha's Vineyard, standing up at James's wedding. And now this. Evidence that James had been systematically embezzling, creating shell companies, falsifying records. The investigator estimated 3 million gone, probably more. Tonight's dinner was supposed to be routine. Quarterly review, upcoming strategy session, the comfortable rhythm of successful partnership. But Daniel had decided during the drive that he would confront James. Privately, carefully, giving him a chance to explain before lawyers and law enforcement made everything irreversible. Mercado's private dining room was all exposed brick and candlelight, insulated from the main restaurant by heavy doors and the kind of discretion expensive establishments cultivated. James and Victoria were already seated when Daniel arrived, champagne breathing in a silver bucket. "Danny." James rose to embrace him, all warmth and white teeth. "Took you long enough. We already started without you." Victoria offered her cheek for a kiss, diamond earrings catching the light. "You look tired, Daniel. Working too hard again." "Always," Daniel said, settling into his chair. The small talk flowed easily. Markets, holidays, James's new boat. Daniel ordered the prix-fixe menu, listening for openings, watching James's face for signs of guilt or awareness. There were none. James was perfectly composed, perfectly normal, either innocent or a better actor than Daniel had realized. The food arrived in careful procession. Amuse-bouche, then salads, then the main course, for Daniel, a pan-seared branzino with preserved lemon and herbs. It looked perfect, smelled perfect, plated with the architectural precision of serious cuisine. He was raising his fork when the door to the private dining room opened. The boy from the street corner stood there, breathing hard, having run. His jacket was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. A waiter appeared behind him, apologizing profusely, trying to guide him away. "Sir, I'm so sorry," he pushed past. But the boy was already moving, crossing the room in 4 quick steps, his hand shooting out to grab Daniel's wrist. "Don't eat that food, sir. Something's wrong with it. I can smell it." The room froze. James's mouth opened slightly. Victoria's hand paused halfway to her wine glass. The waiter stood paralyzed in the doorway. "What are you talking about?" Daniel asked, very carefully. The boy's eyes, dark, intelligent, certain, moved from the plate to James to Victoria and back. "The lady. She went into the kitchen 5 minutes ago. I was in the alley, by the back door where they take deliveries. I go there sometimes after they throw food out. I saw her go in. She gave something to one of the cooks, money I think, and pointed at something. Then she came back out and around to the front. I followed her, but she was already inside." His breathing was rapid, words tumbling out. I know what poison smells like. My uncle died from rat poison someone put in his food. This smells the same. Chemical. Wrong. Victoria laughed, high and sharp. This is absurd. Daniel, this child is clearly disturbed. We're trying to scam you. James, call security. But Daniel was looking at his plate, really looking now. The sauce had a faint iridescence he hadn't noticed before, a slight separation that could have been oil but seemed off. And underneath the lemon and herbs, something else. Bitter. Metallic. What's her name? Daniel asked the boy. Avery, sir. Avery Johnson. Avery, I need you to be very sure about what you're telling me. You saw Mrs. Whitmore go into the kitchen. Yes, sir. The lady in the blue dress with the diamond earrings. I watched her the whole time. Daniel set down his fork and pushed back his chair. James, take out your phone and call 911. Victoria, don't move. No one touches anything on this table until the police get here. Have you lost your mind? Victoria's voice rose. You're going to believe some street urchin over me? Over us. James, do something. But James was staring at his wife with an expression Daniel had never seen before, recognition dawning, horror spreading across his features like spilled ink. Victoria, he said quietly, what did you do? The police arrived in 14 minutes, though it felt longer. Daniel kept everyone in the room, standing between the door and the table, while Avery pressed himself against the wall near the window, watching Victoria with the weariness of someone who'd learned early that danger wore expensive clothes. Victoria's composure had cracked, then shattered. She'd tried indignation first, demanding they leave, threatening lawsuits. When that failed, she'd switched to tears. This was all a misunderstanding. She'd gone to the kitchen only to request extra napkins. The child was lying. Surely they could see he was lying. But her hands betrayed her, trembling as she reached for her purse. James stopped her, his face gray, aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Don't, he said quietly. Don't make it worse. The detectives who came were professionals, efficient and thorough. They separated everyone, took statements, secured the food. Daniel watched them bag his plate, the branzino that had almost been his last meal, and felt reality tilt sideways. This morning he'd been planning a confrontation about embezzlement. Now he was giving a statement about attempted murder. The toxicology team arrived at midnight. They tested the food while Daniel waited in a different dining room. Avery beside him wrapped in a Mercado staff jacket someone had found, still shivering. The boy had refused to leave. I need to know if I was right, he'd said simply. I need to know if I helped. At 12:47, a detective named Morrison came to find them. The fish was contaminated with strychnine. Significant concentration. Medical examiner says you'd have been dead within 2 hours, probably less given the dose. She looked at Avery with something between disbelief and respect. How did you know? The smell, Avery said. And she looked guilty. People look different when they're doing something bad. Their faces get tight, and their eyes move too much. She looked like that when she came out of the kitchen. Morrison nodded slowly. We found the cup she paid. Dishwasher. Actually, 20 years old. Needed money for his mother's medication. Mrs. Whitmore gave him $500 to add special seasoning to your fish. Said it was a prank. He didn't ask questions. She paused. She kept the rest of the poison in her purse. Small bottle, bought under a false name from a chemical supply company in Cincinnati. We're checking her computer now, but it looks premeditated. Why? Daniel asked, though pieces were already assembling in his mind. We're hoping Mr. Whitmore can help with that. But based on what you told us about the embezzlement investigation. Morrison's expression was grim. My guess? You were getting too close. She was protecting her husband or protecting their lifestyle. Maybe both. They arrested Victoria at 1:15 in the morning. Daniel watched from the restaurant window as they led her to the unmarked car, her hands cuffed, her designer coat draped over her shoulders. James followed in a separate car, not arrested but clearly implicated, his empire already crumbling. The detective drove Daniel and Avery to the station for additional statements. Dawn was breaking by the time they finished, pale light washing over Cleveland's skyline. The administrative assistant processing paperwork told them James had confessed to everything. The embezzlement, Victoria's knowledge of it, their growing fear that Daniel's investigation would expose them. Victoria had apparently suggested the poison 3 weeks ago, after a dinner party where she'd joked about mystery novels and perfect murders. Except it hadn't been a joke. She said you'd never suspect her. The assistant reported, reading from notes. Said you trusted them too much, and that made you vulnerable. Said it would look like a heart attack or allergic reaction, and by the time anyone figured it out, they'd be in Monaco with enough money to start over. Daniel sat in the fluorescent brightness of the police station and felt the full weight of betrayal settle over him. 7 years of friendship a lie, his business partner a thief, the woman who'd laughed at his jokes and played with his daughter at birthday parties, someone who'd planned his death with the casualness of planning a vacation. Mr. Okonkwo? Avery's voice was small in the institutional silence. Are you okay? Daniel looked at the boy, this child who'd risked himself to save a stranger, who'd run through rain and pushed past waiters and refused to be dismissed. I'm alive because of you, he said. So yes, I'm okay. They said I could go now. Back to the shelter. Which shelter? King Street. When there's room. Sometimes there's not room, and I have to find other places. Daniel made a decision, quick and certain, the same instinct that had built his fortune. Not tonight. Tonight you're coming home with me. And tomorrow, we're going to talk about making that permanent. Avery stared at him. I don't understand. You saved my life. You saw something wrong, and you didn't look away. You were brave when you could have been safe. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on knees. I have a big house in Bradenall, right on Lake Erie. My daughter's away at college, and it's been too empty since my wife died. I think you and I should talk about you staying there. Properly. With lawyers and social workers, and everything legal. What do you think? I think you might be in shock, Avery said, practical and careful. People say things when they're in shock that they don't mean later. I'm not in shock. I'm very clear. Daniel pulled out his phone, showing Avery his screensaver, a photo of his daughter Zara at her graduation, cap crooked, laughing. I'm a father. I know what it means to protect someone, to want them safe and cared for. And I know what you did tonight required more courage than most adults will ever need. That deserves recognition. That deserves a home. Avery's eyes were bright, too bright. I'd have to be good. I'd have to follow rules and not mess up. Everyone messes up. That's what family means. You get to mess up and still belong. Daniel stood, extending his hand. Let's start with breakfast. Then we'll figure out the rest. The boy's hand, small and cold, fit into his. They walked out of the police station into morning light, into the beginning of something neither had expected. Behind them, the machinery of justice ground forward, arrests and arraignments and trials to come. Ahead lay complications and paperwork and the hard work of building trust. But in that moment, stepping into Cleveland's cold, bright dawn, both of them knew something fundamental had shifted. Both of them had been saved. The house in Bradenall was everything Avery had never imagined existing outside movies. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Erie, rooms that echoed when you walked through them. A kitchen with appliances Avery didn't know the names for. Daniel's housekeeper, a woman named Mrs. Chun who'd been with the family for 15 years, took one look at Avery's duct-taped shoes and disappeared, returning with clothes from storage. Things Daniel's daughter had outgrown, warm and clean, and almost the right size. That first night, Daniel made up the guest room himself, showing Avery how everything worked, where towels were kept, that the door didn't lock, but no one would come in without knocking. You're safe here, he said, and Avery wanted to believe him. Sleep came hard, in a bed too soft, in silence too complete. Avery woke at 3 in the morning from a dream about the restaurant, about Victoria's face when she realized the boy had seen her, about Daniel's fork hovering over poisoned fish, about all the ways the night could have ended differently. There was a light under Daniel's door down the hall. Avery padded toward it, uncertain, knocked softly. Come in. Daniel sat in an armchair by the window, looking out at darkness and water. He'd changed from his suit into sweats and an old t-shirt that said Howard University, Homecoming 1996. He looked smaller, more human. Couldn't sleep? Daniel asked. Keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't followed her. If I just stayed in the alley. But you didn't. You made a different choice. Why though? Avery sat on the edge of the ottoman, pulling his knees up. I didn't know you. You could have been mean or dangerous or not believe me. I could have gotten in trouble. Daniel was quiet for a moment, choosing words carefully. My wife, Zara's mother, died 3 years ago. Cancer. The last thing she said to me was, take care of people. Not just Zara, but people. Anyone who needs it. I've been so buried in work since then, I forgot how to do that. He looked at Avery directly. I think you still remember. Even after everything you've been through, you still help when you see someone in danger. That's rare. That's precious. My mom used to help people too. Before the drugs got bad, she'd give our food to neighbors who had less. Said it came back around. Avery's voice was small, but it didn't come back around for her. She disappeared, and nobody looked for her. I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened. Lots of things shouldn't happen. But they do. Yes, they do. Daniel leaned forward. Here's what I'm offering. A home, for as long as you want it. School, which I know you've missed, because moving between shelters makes that impossible. Stability. Safety. I'm not trying to replace your parents. That's not possible. But I can be someone who's on your side. Someone who shows up. Would that be enough? Avery studied him in the dim light, applying the same careful assessment that had kept him alive on the streets. Daniel's face showed exhaustion, grief, sincerity. No hidden angles. No danger signs. I need to catch up in school. I'm probably way behind. We'll hire tutors. However long it takes. And if people at your work think it's weird that you adopted some random kid, let them think what they want. You're not random. You're the person who saved my life. What about your daughter? What if she doesn't want me here? Daniel smiled. Zara's been texting me for the past hour. She's furious I didn't call her immediately. She's coming home this weekend specifically to meet you. She's studying social work at Howard. She's going to love this whole situation. Avery felt something loosening in his chest, some knot of tension held so long it had become part of his structure. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll try it. But if I mess up, when you mess up, Daniel corrected gently, we'll figure it out together. That's what family does. The paperwork took months. Child Services investigated. Daniel welcomed them, opened every record, submitted to every background. Check. His attorney specialized in adoptions, navigating the system with patient expertise. There were interviews, home visits, psychological evaluations. Avery moved through it all with careful cooperation, still half expecting it to dissolve like morning fog. But it didn't dissolve. Daniel showed up to every meeting, every appointment. He taught Avery to swim in the lake behind the house. He sat through hours of homework, relearning 6th grade math alongside him. When Avery had nightmares, Daniel was there with warm milk and patient listening. When Avery pushed boundaries, staying out too late, lying about finishing assignments, Daniel set consequences with firm kindness, never threatening to send him away. Zara came home for Thanksgiving and immediately declared Avery her new favorite person. She taught him card games, took him shopping for winter clothes that actually fit, talked to him about their mother, Avery's grandmother now, in a sense, who would have adored him. The trial happened in February. Daniel testified about the embezzlement investigation, about James's partnership betrayal. Avery testified about what he'd seen in the alley, Victoria's guilty behavior, his decision to intervene. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Victoria got 18 years for attempted murder. James got 12 for embezzlement and conspiracy. Their assets were frozen, their reputations destroyed. Daniel restructured his firm, brought in new partners, implemented oversight systems. He also started a foundation, the Avery Johnson Initiative, providing housing and education support for homeless youth in Cleveland. Avery had been embarrassed when Daniel told him the name. There are so many kids, he protested. Why name it after me? Daniel had smiled. Because you're the one who reminded me to pay attention. To see people everyone else ignores. That's worth honoring. The adoption finalized in June, a quiet courthouse ceremony with just Daniel, Zara, Mrs. Chillen, and the attorney present. Judge Washington signed the papers with a fountain pen, then looked at Avery over her glasses. Young man, you're very fortunate to have found each other. Yes, ma'am, Avery said, and meant it completely. That night, they had dinner on the terrace overlooking the lake. Steaks Daniel grilled slightly too long, salad Zara assembled, bread Mrs. Chun had baked specially. The June evening was soft and warm, Cleveland summer finally asserting itself. Fireflies emerged as darkness fell, small lights drifting across the lawn. Dad? Avery said, the word still new but growing comfortable. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever think about how different everything could be? If I hadn't been in that alley that night? If I hadn't followed her? Daniel set down his wine glass, considering. Every day? I think about it every single day. He looked at Avery across the table, this boy who'd become his son through circumstances impossible and perfect. I think about how close I came to dying. How close James and Victoria came to getting away with it. How you had every reason to stay invisible, and you chose to be brave instead. I was scared, Avery admitted. I thought you might not believe me. Thought security might hurt me for causing problems. But you did it anyway. That's what courage is, being scared and doing the right thing regardless. Daniel paused. You changed my whole life that night. Not just by saving it, but by showing me what actually matters. I'd been so focused on money, on business, on work that I'd forgotten to be human. You reminded me. Zara raised her glass, lemonade catching candlelight. To Avery. For being exactly who he is, exactly when the universe needed him to be. They toasted, glasses clinking, and Avery felt something he hadn't experienced in the 3 years since his mother disappeared. Belonging. Complete, certain, unchallengeable belonging. Later, after Zara had gone to her room and Mrs. Chun had retired to her apartment over the garage, Avery and Daniel walked down to the water's edge. The lake was calm, reflecting scattered stars. Cleveland's lights glowed behind them, the city vast and indifferent as always, but here in this small space they'd carved out, there was warmth and safety and home. Thank you, Avery said quietly, for believing me. For all of this. Thank you, Daniel replied. For seeing what needed to be seen. For not looking away. You saved my life twice, once from poison and once from loneliness. He put his arm around Avery's shoulders. I'm proud of you. I know I haven't earned the right to say that yet, but I am. Profoundly. You've earned it, Avery said, leaning into the embrace. You earned it every day since. They stood together in the June darkness, father and son, two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and chosen, every day since, to make it real. The water lapped gently at the shore. Above them, stars wheeled through their ancient patterns. And between them, the unshakable certainty that some things, family, courage, love, could not be poisoned, could not be stolen, could only grow stronger with time and trust and showing up, day after day, choosing each other again and again until the choosing became as natural as breathing. Somewhere in Cleveland, children still slept in shelters or on streets, still watched from alleys and learned to make themselves invisible. But here, in this house on the lake, one of them had come home, and in coming home, had proved that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is care about a stranger. Sometimes that changes everything.